Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. I'm debating maybe playing the 10-minute game. Alright, George. One of my better games. One of my best games. Let's review. See if that holds after reviewing. Yes. Okay. The game wasn't all that accurate. Yet, some of this tension in sort of the middle portion of the game, whether it was the mid game or not yet, just, yeah, it's too inaccurate. Mistake. All these moves, move after move. Each side is playing bad moves. So this wasn't as accurate as it could be. I think the exchanges went correctly. After the Rook H5 blunder, which we'll get to. Let's start here. Some of this other stuff I don't really want to get too far into. Rook to H5 is meant to say, if you want to capture on F6, do so. It's a different way of putting the question to the bishop, putting the question to the G5 bishop. Of course, after exchanges on F6, the material swap, if the rook commits itself to an exchange, would be better for black. So white might play bishop takes F6, to which I'm playing bishop takes F6. And then probably the exchanges would stop there, and white will hold on to the exchange, and will hold on to the rook instead of trading off. At which point I'm not exactly sure how that is so dangerous for black as to be a rook to the worse. Let's see here. I'll find the top line. Bishop takes F6, bishop takes F6. Queen G4 check. Seen as very strong for white. When the black king moves out of the way to C7, then the pawn on G6 is hanging. After which the rook on H8 is threatened, and it's crazy from there. So after bishop takes F6, bishop takes F6, Queen G4 check, probably king to C7 despite the controlled squares where the knight might advance because they're controlled by black. And then white will capture on G6. And this rook is no longer covered by the knight that was captured, so he's going to have to scurry away probably to the 8th rank, and it looks like black is left a little bit flat-footed. Queen D2 instead. Some of this is just very inaccurate. I think we get back on track with knight takes D2, and when the exchanges go as planned, black's gonna be up the exchange and a pawn. So 3 points of material, and then convert that. Some of this material had to be thrown away, jettisoned as ballast, some would say. So I jettisoned the C pawn to double my rooks. And I jettisoned And then I played rook to f1 check to move his king. Rook to c1 is fine. The d6 pawn sort of gets jettisoned or lost in the milieu. And then king to e7. Rook takes g6, another jettisoned pawn. Note that the pawn on a6 could probably be freely taken. And I'm playing rook to f1. It was a big bet that I made a long time ago on those first pawn or two that I could make checkmate against white's king, given the configuration of his kingside pawns, the placement of my kingside pawn, and doubling on this back rank, which was vacant. There was no rook to say, hey, get out of here. And so I have these rooks on the first rank, and I'm looking to checkmate with a move like rook to h1, and there's others that can evidence themselves, as we'll see in reviewing the game. It would be interesting. This pawn on a6 is turned down by white. Often that means there's something really serious brewing. Either white is defending or trying to defend against a checkmate, or is going to press for one, him, her, or they self. Computers do this too. So possibly him, her, they, or itself. We had pawn to g3. Pawn to g3, you know, in the moment I thought that wasn't such a bad move. I saw how to defeat it pretty much right away, but there are some ideas behind it, and it requires black to readjust what type of checkmate he's going to enforce on white. So that was where that was. Note too that if this doesn't end up in a checkmate, there are alternate plans where the rook on g6 might be captured by check from g1 to white's king anywhere on the g file, but most probably g2. And then the rook is lost to the skewer immediately after. So I'm feeling pretty good here, as well I should. This game is going to be sewn up. You see this resignation where the knight must block in one way or the other to stave off checkmate for just one move, as my opponent resigned. It was a fun. Why I said after finishing the game, and now, you know, after more scrutiny, I would say it's probably not one of my best games anymore. Just because this here on the move list, can you see this? I know my face sometimes covers things up here. All right, let's move this a bit. This move list here. Look at all that fruit punch, guys. We got peaches. We got blueberries. We got kiwis. We got strawberries and cherries, maybe. You know, this is nuts for being someone's very best game. We got banana, and banana. All right, so I can't let that to really dictate or be present in one of my very best games. However, when it came to it on the exchanges I was on, and I'm really glad that at this point I said, okay. I got this thought from somewhere, and I said, okay, I'll, let's go for it. The position calls for an attack with my rooks. I have the extra rook compared to my opponent. I've got a pawn in the area, keeping things, keeping a wandering king at bay. Let's do this. So I said, let's do this. And my opponent is gobbling up these pawns. I mean, look at me. I'm still mourning these pawns. I won the dang game already. I'm still worried about this about this material, right? The game's over. Finito. Enfin. C'est fertig. It's just fertig. It's finished. Done. But I'm still worried about these pawns that I think two of them do get captured. And then with the rook move that sets up the doubling, you could put it on pretty much any one of these squares. This square looks like by number, if this is -3 and this is -5, that maybe there's something a little bit less strong about rook b1. Perhaps if rook b1, then in some circumstances you want to capture b2, but then you also have to capture c2 when your real goal is your opponent's king. So making two captures takes an extra tempo. Some kind of thing like that. Rook to c1 was optimal as played. Rook to d1 is probably okay, maybe not. It doesn't show up as one of black's top moves. So there could be some sort of move like knight to c3 to chase that rook, and then things aren't quite as good for black but are still pretty good. And then rook e1 is indicated also a strong move for black. I wanted mostly separation, enough separation to avoid enough separation and the right kind of separation to avoid forks, while also staying with white king on h2 as my intended target. That's it. So I chose c1. Rook captures with check. Can't be captured because of the knight, of course. So I scurry away. Another pawn down, and the key move, rook to f1. Let's play this against computer. I want to see played out how white could avoid checkmate in this position. Aha. Guarding the checkmating square by throwing away the minor piece. Okay, no, that's good. I agree. There's nothing to agree on, George. Wow, it still sounds fun to agree on things sometimes. All right. Rook takes c2. Black's doing fine, just to be careful not to lose too many more pawns, as we're down to just our final two. All right, so as now I've been able to equalize the pawn situation, or close to it, against the computer taking over. Uh, it Black has the extra rook, and that's game. We can even enforce a trade, I think, by playing rook to f3, then putting ourselves in a protected position. And see, my opponent has chosen to evade the trade, although I wasn't exactly there, was it? Each year they always had rook to g8. Okay, well, not all too worried about that. Oh, good thing I cared about all those pawns that were going missing before. I wouldn't be able to close this down. If I didn't have either pawn, I'm not sure I could close this down. Connected passers on the flank, and my opponent has a rook. I have a king and two rooks. So that'd be an interesting thing. This particular ending, yes, I can clean this up, or, dust this off, or whatever metaphor. All right. Even little details. I'm getting good at some of these little details. Capturing with the rook. We got the rook. But look, just slightly better. Capturing with the king. The pawn's still pinned. It didn't seem to be worth all that much now that my opponent moved to g5. But might he have had something even crazier? I don't know. That didn't quite take hold. But let's try to find. Let's guard the 8th. This is probably exactly right. All right. Sometimes you make these like almost too much of a sacrifice in the end game. If the computer played king takes g6, then rook takes g4 check, just shows that I've got two major pieces and my opponent doesn't. But it didn't quite work out like that. All right. This was not one of my best games ever. It was a marker of progress. Here's the practice. We have this analysis board, and it's going to show us how accurate the play was with the game as it were, and then on to best defense a few moves before the game as it were it ended just before checkmate. It doesn't mean that well, that doesn't mean that would be how my opponent would have played, but it's a good thing to hunt down some of your wins and see, this would have been tricky, or in a different game, hunt down a win and say, this one was just as easy as I had imagined. Okay, I'm gonna close some windows. Not sure what to do. The Devils, I follow the New Jersey Devils hockey, and I think I'm going to sign off here, folks. Okay. All right. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.